Hey everyone, Coach Micah here, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode of Mars Hill Monday, we're going to be taking a look at an art piece by a very talented artist, and of course deciphering the meaning and learning how to describe pictures to judges who you are unable to show the pictures to. And yes, we still have our Christmas decorations up, but that's only because the winters in Washington are cold, dark, and bleak, and we wanted to liven up our space a little longer before we, of course, eventually have to take it down. And speaking of eventually taking things down, that's exactly the messages and the themes that we will see in these art pieces by Rone. So let's get straight into it. Take a look at this painting here. This is one of many pieces by an artist who goes by the name Rone, based off his full name, Tyrone. This picture here, of course, the very first thing you see in the center of it is a woman who is looking up towards the sky. But you'll also notice the setting. We have some sort of abandoned building here. There's a lot of debris on the ground, panels in the wall are missing, the ceiling is letting light in because there's a lot of space on the roof that is just open to the elements. Just a space that formerly probably had some really cool stuff in it, but now is just completely run down. You see the exact same thing here, except the image is a little more intense because there's a lot more damage and destruction. But once again, despite the damage and destruction, our eyes are focused on the almost like the haunting look of the lady who is painted onto the clear wall. Also by Rone. And there are many other paintings that Rone has created, painting his subjects in the midst of damaged and destructive elements here. You have the part of his empty exhibit called I've Seen Fire and I've Seen Rain, and you'll notice that the look, the expression on this woman's face definitely look like the serious and deep thought definitely look like she has seen fire and rain, probably some sort of metaphor for the horrors that she has experienced or the tragedies that she's gone through in her life. And it also looks like the buildings that she is looking through also have experienced some sort of tragedy. It looks as if this building has been charred by a fire. Now, this is where we, of course, get into the theme here, which, as you can see, is very much destruction or decay. Part of the way that I prepare for these videos is I put all of my research into the document that is actually shared on my Patreon page. You will have access to it there. And of course, the document tab that we have open today is Empty by Rone. And on the screen here, you'll notice I have a way of showing you how to do paintings and visual art when it comes to a limited preparation speech. Because remember, the judges can't see what the piece is. Maybe they know what it is, but I guarantee a lot of people will not know what this one is. So the way you might break this piece down into five pieces. And this is not to say that these should be 5 different points in your Mars Hill speech, but rather for you, how you're going to organize the flow of the speech. You might condense these down into 3 main points, right? I always like to say the background, the cultural significance, and then of course the biblical connection, right? Is the 3 main points. You talk about the piece, you talk about how it affects society, and then that moves into a more personal connection of how you link it to the Bible. And that is a structure that you can use in any speech, whether it be a platform speech, an impromptu speech, even a debate. You usually have your background, you apply it to the real world, and then you have some sort of personal connection at the end, right? But anyways, with this type of piece for Mars Hill, we're first going to talk about the artist background and of course discuss some notable facts, things relevant to the piece. We're also going to describe the piece, and this is where you're going to test your ability to use descriptive language, and having a really good vocabulary is going to help there. We're going to also connect this piece to the artist. We're going to ask questions like, why did they create the art? What were they inspired by? Those are really interesting facts we need to know. Then we're going to use that as a transition into how does this piece inspire others? What's its connection to the rest of the world and to society? We might include some stats here, usually linking the amount of viewers to the piece. So how many people came in and saw the piece? Why did they do it? Did they have to pay money? Why would they pay so much money? Kind of stuff like that. And then we link it to the personal connection. Well, people really like this piece because it touches on something that they've experienced in their life, for example. And then we take that personal connection and we use it as a really natural segue into the biblical connection. So a lot of society deals with this problem. Well, that's crazy because in the Bible they dealt with the same problem, but I, personal connection, am comforted because of what the Bible says about this. So that's a really good way of crafting a persuasive and engaging Mars Hill speech. So with that, let's scroll down and look at how we can use that for this particular structure here. So we have a little bit of artist background and notable facts. So Rone, and you could make a joke that Rone is also, I think, a musician, like an EDM musician. That's electronic dance music for those of you that don't know. Some sort of musician, but that's not who we're talking about today. We're actually talking about a street artist. Maybe there's some humor if you're that type of person. A street artist is literally someone who just goes around in the city streets and just creates art. You might make a joke that lots of graffiti would call themselves, graffitiers. I don't know what you call someone who does graffiti. A street artist, I guess, right? You could also talk about how he is actually one of the highest supported Australian street artists because he's based out of Melbourne. That's another thing. Well, Melbourne, if you're Australian. He was given a grant from the Australian government of $1.86 million in order to create art. That could also be a joke, because who gives over $1 million to someone who just draws on city walls? I mean, that makes me want to go out and be an artist in the street. But I looked it up and my city gives grants that are like $2,000, so I don't think I'll waste my time. But of course I haven't. Maybe I might quickly explain what an art grant is just to help with some relevance. It's basically when the government gives you free money because being an artist does not pay well, and so the only way you're going to get paid is if you use taxpayer dollars to pay it. But anyways, as you look at one of these pieces here, you might be thinking, well, I would happily have my taxpayer dollars go to people who create such beautiful works of art, even in destroyed buildings that are about to be destroyed, right? And this is where we get to describing the piece, describing the exhibit, because empty is an exhibit, an exhibition, I guess is the right word, but it's actually a collection of pieces. So throughout the world, throughout Australia, Rone has gone around to buildings that were destroyed, buildings that are about to be destroyed, and painted these intricate and beautiful portraits. And the reason he did it is because he likes the thrill of knowing that his art is ultimately going to be destroyed in relatively short order. We'll get into that in a second, but if you think about it, a lot of people's paintings go on a canvas and they hang in a museum, or they are sold to some art collector and that hangs in their mansion for years and years and years and years, right? But Rone has taken a different approach. He is actually creating pieces in a format in which he knows that they're going to be destroyed, which is really interesting. So his exhibition is in Star Lyric Theater, which was a theater that was going to be demolished, and that space was opened up for a certain amount of time for him to have people come view his work, and then of course the Star Lyric Theater was torn down, and this was back in 2016. Relevant information there. So as I'm doing a lot of the research for this piece, I will look up, the website. So right here we have his website, and it goes into his galleries, right? I can go to empty, This right here is the space. Beautiful space. Doesn't look as destroyed. It's just empty, right? There's nothing in it except for this piece right here, and people viewing it. And this theater is about to be torn down, a few weeks from being torn down. This is, of course, on October 14th, 2016. And so he goes into detail as to what the piece represents for him. He actually takes a lot of pictures and videos of his pieces so that they can be immortalized, but just in a digital format. So people cannot actually go to these pieces in person anymore because they're completely gone. The canvases, the space that he used to paint them are completely gone. But we can still enjoy them via an immersive virtual reality video experience that he created. But anyways, this is the focus point of his empty exhibition. A woman with a haunting face in an empty space. And of course, I'm also going to be asking myself, well, what does the piece actually mean? And in this tab, you'll have a YouTube video linked because he goes into what it means for him, why he created it. That's all really relevant information for you. This article starts out with the idea that it's about loss, the transient beauty of Rone. In crumbling, abandoned spaces in cities around the globe, Melbourne street artist Rone's portraits of beautiful women shine, and then they're gone. For the artistically stunted among us, the idea of laboring intensely on murals while perched on ladders, cranes, and cherry pickers for days or weeks, only to have our beautiful images tagged with graffiti or smashed to rubble, is a profoundly depressing one. And yeah, imagine if I went through all this effort to create this YouTube video or to coach you, only to know that, you know, these YouTube videos would just be deleted like the next day. Like, that would be really depressing because you're putting so much hard work into something. But ultimately, he's doing it for a reason. Now, I want to quickly go back to describing the paintings, right? So, Rone paints striking pictures of women's faces, usually with a particular deep expression. I'm going to quote a critic right here, right? One art critic tells them intimate emotions, or calls these facial expressions intimate emotions, as though these women have always been a part of the space and perhaps hold its secrets, right? And this is where we go into the artist's inspiration. I have that YouTube video, which you can go to via this document tab here. In that video, he asks the question, every empty space poses a question, what was there before there was nothing? The story of each space is told by what's left behind. Interesting thought. And referring to one of the particular subjects of his painting, he goes, yeah, this was the place where something existed. So before I came in, something existed here. Now it doesn't, obviously. And he says, I'm trying to put the human element back into it. So if you think about it, abandoned buildings, places that are cited for removal in short order, whether it's because they were destroyed and they're unsafe, or we're just going to remove it because something better is going to be put there, something more relevant to helping society. That thing existed for a reason. People put it there, people used it, and now it's gone. And so he's asking the question, what exactly was there? I'm trying to put a human element into it. And he's also asked about why women in particular are his subjects, because all of his paintings in this empty exhibition throughout the world are of women and their faces. He says, women are the ideal image for me to paint. A guy has often aggressive or masculine overtones. With women, there is strength and fragility, he says. Quote, I don't think I try to paint sexy women or intimacy, but there is a closeness. There's a friendship. It's hard to describe the moments or emotions, not happy or not sad. So these paintings are not, problematic. They're not, family friendly, right? But he chooses women for a reason, and I think like the beauty of these women's faces, they're very beautiful. They are, within a very ugly space. So you could start thinking about a theme of beauty through the chaos, beauty and destruction. And honestly, that's the theme that I first thought of when I was researching this piece and researching this video here. The idea, I have it down here in other themes. So there's beauty in chaos, or there's giving life to the run down. But ultimately, after really focusing on how does this connect to the rest of the world, we figured out a different theme that I think is more relevant and more persuasive, honestly. And it's always good to, when you first think of something, immediately have a theme down. So something's going to come to mind. When I first saw one of the paintings of Empty, I thought, well, this is definitely beauty and chaos. This is what the speech is going to be about. But once I did a little more research, I actually changed my mind, because it's not necessarily just about beauty and chaos. So if you're doing Mars Hill or you're researching, don't just go with the first theme. Maybe have it as a backup if you can't think of anything else, like be prepared. But if you can look into it a little deeper, you might just find that you will be persuaded by a different theme, one that is actually ultimately more impactful. Because when we look at how this piece connects to the rest of the world, right, there were 12,000 people who visited it in 10 days, according to his website. The real part of his piece here is that of the idea that nothing lasts forever. And he says nothing lasts forever. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. You can have the most grandest design, the most beautiful building, right? If you think about the ancient wonders of the world, they were once beautiful, complex, right? But they just don't last forever. Everything falls apart. And I might use this as a way to segue into the idea that falling apart, not lasting forever, is so true. And it's often what drives people to do things, and it motivates how they live either the rest of their lives or in some cases end them, right? Because we ultimately know, and a lot of people ultimately know, that everything is futile, just doesn't matter. And I was taken, and you don't have to make this connection, but I recently, as I've been getting into chess, I learned that there was a chess grandmaster who it is believed that he committed. And I kind of made that connection in my mind of like, this guy was a master at a game of chess, a game that so many people adore, and so many people adored him, just the beautiful situation that he's in. But ultimately, it didn't really mean anything to him. Maybe he figured out, maybe he was depressed, maybe, and I don't know, but maybe it's just the idea that despite the beauty, nothing lasts forever, right? And this is ultimately what Rone has said about his pieces. Let's scroll down here. I have this link in here in the Mars Hill. This is from, I don't know what, ABC News, I guess. I will warn you, he is quoted about saying people drawing bad things on his thing, and he uses a particular word, so viewer discretion advised. Yeah, in this article, he says, he turns to his computer, he says, wait, I just wrote this down, beautiful works in places of neglect to highlight what we may have lost. And ultimately, that's a very depressing thought, right? So he's bringing attention to these abandoned spaces, but provoking the thought of nothing really matters, everything is meaningless. And that idea of the meaning of life, or the temporariness of the pleasures of life, are quite depressing for people. Sometimes that thought can be too much for people, especially in a society that has no hope, or believes they have no hope, because they're just focused on trying to live everything now, gain as much pleasure as possible, because they know it won't last. They're searching for that temporary high, right? And this is where we can get into potentially the real theme, the real connection to the Bible. Not just the idea of beauty and chaos, but the idea of eternity, right? The idea that beauty doesn't have to be temporary. And this is where I make that personal connection, right? I can talk about how I also struggle with those deep thoughts. The idea that nothing really matters. And maybe you can make the nod to the Mars Hill speech that you're giving, right? You can talk about how all the accolades that I will potentially win, hopefully, maybe a little humor, hopefully win, don't matter. As the great Doc Hudson from Cars once said, it's just an empty cup, right? Nothing matters. Even in the moment, it's so good, but it will not last. You could talk about how in the Bible, the author of Ecclesiastes just is constantly talking about how nothing really matters, right? Life is vain, pleasures, they don't last. And this is where we make that switch, right? You're acknowledging that society is correct, nothing really matters, everything is temporary, except it's not, right? But I'm comforted, and you can go two different directions here. You could say, I'm ultimately comforted because I know that there is eternity. In Psalms 119, 89 through 90, I read, "Forever, O Lord, your word is firmly fixed in the heavens. Your faithfulness endures to all generations. You have established the earth, and it stands fast." Or, I really like the 2 Corinthians 4, 17 through 18 verse, right? I'm comforted despite all of this acknowledgement of how meaningless and temporary everything is. I'm comforted because I read in 2 Corinthians 4, 17 through 18, "For our present troubles are small, and they won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now, but rather we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever." You can make that call to your audience. Don't you want to last forever? Don't you want the beauty of life to last forever? Well, we are given that through Christ. We're given that through eternal life, etc. Like, you can make that connection. Unlike Rone's beautiful paintings, our beautiful lives are just a step where God introduces us into never-ending beauty, right? So you could talk about beauty and chaos. You could absolutely go down that road, or you could even go down the road of giving life to the rundown, right? God takes people who were abandoned. God takes people who have gone through destructive episodes in their lives. He takes people of all conditions and he gives them life. He brings beauty back into their life. That could be a theme, right? Ultimately, though, I think a more impactful one is the idea that because all people can relate to feelings of just insignificance, feeling that things are temporary. And so I might choose in a Mars Hill speech the lesson or the theme that is going to relate to the most amount of people. It's the most relatable, or the more relatable, I should say, the better the speech is going to be, because not everyone can relate to having parts of their lives that were really, really bad. Not everyone is in a horrible place, right? But everybody has thought about how temporary their lives are. Everyone has come to the realization that this might be all they have. And then that's where you can offer that hope. Ultimately, the pieces are absolutely beautiful. And I really enjoy viewing art. Of course, I have the links to the articles that I read and cited in my description there in my research, as well as the YouTube video that Rone himself posted. It's about 3 minutes long, so not a hard viewing at all. Very easy to view. And so I would totally recommend you go and watch that, because it's going to give you an insight into his creative process. As I'm losing my voice, even my voice is temporary, right? Thank you so much for watching today's video. I will see you next Monday.